Hello, Dolf. How are you doing?
Eva, I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing tonight?
Excited because you're here with me.
Oh, that's very kind.
So go ahead and tell me about your wisdom.
Oh, wisdom. You know, I love that saying that some people are wise and some are otherwise. And I like that other one that a fool thinks he is wise. It is the wise person who knows himself to be a fool. So to share wisdom, listen, I'm just a mortal being. When you cut me, I bleed, and I've just had some interesting experiences that have shaped me, just like everyone else's experiences have shaped them. And who's to say that my perception of the world based on my experiences are any better than anyone else's perception of the world based on theirs? In fact, I'd go so far as to say that if we could swap places with anyone else on this planet, we would probably end up with their belief system, their religion, their everything. We'd be just an ardent believer of their political beliefs and their religious beliefs and everything else, what food to eat, whether you should be vegetarian or not, as we currently are of our own beliefs, because we're all a product to some extent of our environment. And proof of that is twin research, and I'm sure you've read about twin research, but when twins are horribly split up at birth and they grow up completely in separate environments, it's interesting to see the things that they have in common, and there are some innate things that they do have in common. The way they think about things, their disposition, maybe things like that. But there are other things that are totally dependent on their environment. And I often say, you know, it's a touchy subject maybe, but, you know, we'll pick on two religions that perhaps not many people here are familiar with, but if a person born into a Shinto religion swaps place at birth with someone who would otherwise have been born into a Hindu religion, then they would have their adoptive family's faith. It's just the nature of things. And it's neither good nor bad, it's just an observation. So yeah, I don't think I've got any wisdom that is more meritorious than anyone else's, but I do like having fun and I enjoy giving other people pleasure. I read a lot. I think reading is a lost art, especially with social media. Book readership is down. Here in the US, 20 years ago, we had 46,000 bookstores. We're down to 5,800.
Really?
People aren't buying books anymore. And on top of that, they say that 80% of books bought are never read, as if we're going to gain the information that's revealed between the covers through a process of osmosis or something. It's not going to happen. So we need to read more. So I'm an avid reader, but there's a book by Roald Dahl. It was a novel. It was called My Uncle Oswald, and it's a bit of a raucous account. But I'll never forget him quoting his Uncle Oswald, saying that making money has got to fulfill two requirements. Firstly, he says, it's got to amuse you immensely. I like that. It's got to be fun. And secondly, it's got to give a lot of pleasure to those from whom you extract the loot. And forget the word phrasing he used. There's an element of truth to that. If you can give a lot of pleasure to the people that you're charging to do whatever you're doing, then that's a worthy cause. And I don't mean it in a hedonistic sense, although it probably applies there as well, but even beyond hedonism. If you do any service, if you make spectacles for blind people and it gives a lot of pleasure to the users, then that's worthy. That makes it really worthwhile. So yeah, they're my overriding thoughts on any wisdom I may have.
Dolf, I have been listening to your audios for a long time. I used to go sleep with you.
Yes, a lot of women have said they used to go to sleep with me, and unfortunately for me it's through cassette tapes and CDs and all that, but anyway, yes.
Yes, and I learned a lot, and I believe that part of my creativity is because of you.
Oh wow, that's nice to hear. I did not know that, so thank you.
I never saw in one place so many cases of being creative in real estate. And I'm curious, what are you known for, Dolf?
You should really interview other people and say, what's that weird guy Dolf known for? Because I don't know what other people know me for. I only know what I know myself. But I think it is fair to say that I'm known as coming up with creative solutions for things. So real estate is one situation, but it's not just real estate. It's just about in any endeavor. And I can give you, all kinds of examples of that. But in real estate, absolutely. I think that real estate isn't the same for everyone. A property that I buy, be it a commercial building or a residential building, is different from the property that you buy. Not because the bricks and the stones and the nails and the screws are different. It's because when you buy it, you've got a different vision. You see things differently. You've got a different background. You were partially raised in Brazil. You see things that I didn't even know about, because despite having had 180 laps around the world, I've never been to Brazil. So you know things that you might be able to incorporate that go on in Brazil that I haven't even heard about. And similarly, I've seen things that you may not have heard about. So when you buy a house, it's a different house from when I buy that exact same house, because we do things differently. The question is, to what extent do you do things differently? And that's where I'd say most people just go about their lives of sort of grey monotony, watching their favorite soap on TV to see who killed whom. That's going back to Who Killed JR, that's a bit old for people, or Who Slept With Whom is a more popular topic these days. And you're really living a scriptwriter's fantasy by watching this, instead of going out and living your own life and observing what's happening. One of the things I absolutely love about travel, forget that I haven't been to Brazil from that, but you go to Japan, I've been there often, or Indonesia, Vietnam, you pick up ideas about how they do things differently. Is it so much better in those countries that I want to live there? No, not necessarily. I haven't lived in any of those countries for any length of time ever. But I've been there a lot, and I love going there, and I see things all the time that I think, dang, that's a great idea. Why don't we adopt that back home? And I can give you examples if you want, but I don't want to bore you with them.
No, go ahead. I love it.
So in Japan, space is at a premium. It's about the size of California, and it's got a population currently of 127 million. That's another whole story, because they've got the second lowest birth rate in the world, so they're going to have a population collapse soon. But only 16% of the country can be built on. That means that 127 people are crammed into landmass 16% the size of California. So space is at a premium, especially in the big cities. So we have car parking buildings. In fact, driving here tonight, is it not true that you said, oh, what's that building there with all the lights? And I said, well, that's car parking for Sky Harbor Airport.
Yep.
So we have these massive big buildings where you drive up into the lots of lanes to drive and find your parking. The area occupied by parked cars is a small fraction of the total area of the building. In Japan, they have a system, it's like a squashed up Ferris wheel, or if you're familiar with it, a paternoster elevator, where you drive your car into a hole in the wall and it goes onto a ramp, and it's like a big Ferris wheel that's been squashed together, and your car goes up. Now, the interesting thing is you don't stay in the car, so as soon as the car is parked in this thing, you step out, you get a credit card-like thing that knows where your car is, and it goes up. You can leave it unlocked. There's no possibility of theft because it's this mechanical contraption. There are no assaults or rapes or murders or anything happening in this car parking space. You can get as many cars as you like, let's say 50 cars into a space, the width of 2.5 cars, the length of one car, and however high you need it to get your 50 cars in there, 5, 6, 7 stories. Brilliant idea. And then when you come back, you put your card in the slot, it knows where your car is, it brings it back down, it backs it off for you, it spins it on a circular platform so that you don't need to back out, and you drive off. Now, we're in Phoenix tonight when we're recording this. Is this a good idea for Phoenix? No. Land is so cheap here that we tend to build out rather than up. So in all of Phoenix, which has got a massive population, Phoenix is now the 5th largest city in the country. Most people don't realize that. Our airport, Sky Harbor Airport, not too far from here, is the 5th busiest airport in the country. And yet we only have about 20 high-rise towers, and high is 16 stories, qualifies you as a high-rise here. So we build out. But in other cities like New York or Sydney or other places around there, this Japanese concept is very useful. And I've introduced it to some of these places where we've incorporated into buildings, because when it comes to commercial space, the value of a commercial space in terms of euros per square meter or dollars per square foot is partially dependent on how many car parks you have. In America, it's known as how many spaces you have per 1,000 square feet of lettable space. But it's a metric you use. So if you can get more car parks for your workers, then the value of the office space goes up. Mm-hmm. So all these things are interrelated. And if you never travel, if all you do is sit on your backside, watch TV and do Sudoku puzzles or crossword puzzles, you're never going to see this. You're never going to explore. You're never going to think about it. And after a while, when you get into the habit of saying, what else can I do? How can I adapt what I saw there? How can I incorporate what I've got from home into something over there? Then you start to become creative, and it becomes a game.
Yeah.
It's like some people who are obsessed with crossword puzzles or jigsaw, it becomes like that. What else can I do? The difference is when you finish a crossword puzzle, you can, I don't know, praise yourself and think I've expanded my knowledge of words a bit. And when you do a jigsaw puzzle, you can say this is great, but most people break them down again because they don't have the space to keep them. But at least when you do one of these things, you can help people. You can provide more parking for the workers or more dollars for the person. I mean, if you want to put it in monetary terms, you can too.
That's crazy.
Anyway, that's a long answer
That's
to your
amazing.
question.
No, it's amazing. So the trend of the America right now, data center. What do you have to say about data center?
Well, it's not just a trend in America. I mean, whether we like it or not, we're going more and more towards a society whereby we store things online. And gosh, I remember when CompuServe came out. CompuServe of itself was an ability to communicate with other CompuServe members, and they used the computer power of the H&R Block. Now, those in America probably are familiar with the name H&R Block. It's a company that looks after the tax returns of people, but in the US, most of your tax returns are filed on April the 15th. So in the lead up to that, February, March, April, there's heavy use of those H&R Block computers, but for the rest of the year, they kind of lay idle. So they thought, what can we do? They interconnected them using initially telephone networks, and people could communicate that way. And I remember reading an advantage of being a member of a businessman who flew from Australia to New York for business, and he left his address book behind, and his secretary could send a file through this CompuServe network of interconnected phone lines all the way from Sydney to New York to get an electronic version of his address book in New York. And looking back, that is so primitive. In fact, many of your viewers, maybe you're yourself, are going to say, well, that's weird. We just connected to the cloud. Like when you add a person to your address book on your phone, for most of us, it gets updated to the cloud and synced with your computer and your iPad and whatever else you have going. But you know, we've got more and more data being stored now, and it's going up exponentially. So the need for data centers has increased exponentially. And when we look at two trends, the big trend that everyone's talking about, of course, is AI. That's going to massively increase the demand for processing power. So data centers are going to perform some of that, and also storing some of the output of all this processing we're doing. That's going to happen. The other thing is quantum computing. It's not on the forefront of as many people's minds and not on the tips of their tongues as AI is, but it's going to happen, and it's going to cause an explosion of data because it has so much more processing bandwidth, if you like, capacity. So yes, the demand for data centers, I believe, is going to rise exponentially. We have to temper it with the reality that the size of components needed to store a certain number of bits of information or gigabits of it is shrinking all the time. So where before you might have needed a whole floor of a building to do a certain number of storage, now you just need half a room. You all know that trend, Moore's law, doubling of power and capacity every 18 months. But be that as it may, it's still going to require more and more capacity. So I'm finding in a lot of buildings, I mentioned a building I'm looking at in Phoenix right now, it's in the central corridor here, a twin 20-story tower. 3 floors are already converted to data center functionality.
Really?
And I think it's got the capacity to do a lot more. And that brings into play other things like, you know, you don't want to know about a lot of this, but do you have backup power? Like if there's a mains power failure. And yes, this one has two 2-megawatt generators that even when the entire building is cut off from outside electricity and these 4 megawatts of generating capacity are running, they're only running at 11% capacity. That's what you want. That means you can expand more floors into data centers and provide power for them in critical moments when the mains power or the centrally provided power goes down. So all of these things are interrelated, and it's when you're wide awake and you take an interest in things that you start to have more cross correlations and permutations of ideas. And that's, to me, the exciting part about life. We can create things that weren't there before.
Exactly. So if somebody wants to invest in data centers, where's the best place to purchase, best location to have these buildings?
Well, I mean, if you mean in human terms, it's best for them to contact you because you know me and then you can contact me.
Okay,
that's one
good.
way.
I love that.
When it comes to geography, one of the reasons why I'm big on data centers for Phoenix is, unlike California, we have no measurable earthquakes here. There's no expectation of a major tectonic plate movement event happening here and disrupting things the way there is in California. Unlike the East Coast, we have no cyclones and hurricanes and tornadoes. We have no mudslides. I mean, it's a pretty benign climate here. The only thing we have, everyone will say, you forgot the heat. Yes, it gets hot here, and you need to keep data centers cool. So that is a bit of a challenge. But on the other hand, because of the good weather, we attract a lot of people here. So when TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company, looked at setting up a plant, because right now over 90% of all critical semiconductors come out of their plants in Taiwan. When they looked at setting up in the United States. They chose Phoenix, and they're building right now an $80 billion plant about 12 miles from where we're sitting now. And that's not coincidence. They took all those factors into account as well. Despite the heat, we've got low physical challenges in terms of tornadoes and earthquakes, and it's a great place for workers to come. That plant alone, I think, is employing more than 10,000 people. So in terms of geography, you want it to be in a central place with a benign environmental situation. You want it to have good data links, so you need fiber optic pipes crisscrossing the country. And that's another interesting thing, because for a long time, the United States was founded on the railroad companies. They were the big mega companies that really did well, and the owners of those became mega rich. And then over time, railroads in America became sort of third rate. It wasn't the preferred method of travel. We all took to cars, and now it's flying. And railroads weren't doing so well, unlike Europe, where it's still a very popular way of getting around, and often it's faster than going by plane. But then a very interesting thing happened. We went from having telephone line connection, first the Pony Express, if you remember that. Well, not remember it personally. No one who lived in that era is alive to remember it. But if you remember reading about it, I know people don't read anymore. But Pony Express, then we went to telegraph lines where we had Morse code going along copper wires, and then eventually we improved it until we had phone lines, and for many generations the phone was the way of communicating. And then we got microwave dishes and all that. But there was a very interesting merger between railroad companies and telecom companies, because these railroad companies had acquired the rights to a strip of land 3 or 4 meters wide, 3 or 4 yards wide, crisscrossing the country for their railway lines. So they made specialized trains with a jig out the side that dug a trench about 4 meters deep along the side of the railroad track, and they laid these fiber optic cables. So they had access to land crisscrossing the country to lay the fiber optic cables, and it caused a revival in the value of the stock of these railroad companies, although often they were renamed so that you wouldn't really be so aware of their railroad background. Very interesting. But again, it took someone with a creative mind to say, oh my gosh, these railroads have access to all this land. Do we need the land to lay our fiber optic cables? Brilliant combination. And that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. Where these things happen all the time, you've just got to think of them.
What other states do you think we can find this type of ideal property for data centers?
Well, you're going to say I'm biased here, because I've been living in Phoenix for a while. I've been here longer than anywhere else. But people say, well, you just invest in Phoenix because you live here. And no, they haven't figured out yet that I chose to live here because I wanted to invest here for all the factors that we've been talking about. So you need a good population, 5th largest city now. Okay. I'm sure there are places, maybe in Montana, I don't know, I've been to many states, but not Montana. But maybe it's very benign too, although I hear it gets very cold in the winter, but that's good if you want to cool your data centers. But it doesn't have the population. You can't draw on as many people to work in the data centers. And I doubt whether all the telco companies have their fiber optic pipes going through Montana the way they do through Phoenix. Phoenix is on the way between the East Coast and the West Coast. I know it's closer to the West Coast than the East. So yes, I think the general Phoenix area is good, but there are many other places. We shouldn't have them all in one place. They should be scattered around. So rather than looking for the city, I'd rather look for specific buildings within cities that might lend themselves to that. I looked at one about a year ago. I missed out on it. It was just outside of Houston. It was on 36 acres of land. The owner owed $32 million to the funders, and they couldn't meet their financing payments, if you like. So they were letting it go. It had 12 megawatts of electricity coming into it, massive oversupply of their electrical needs. And the cap rate was based just on the operation alone. You basically got 35 acres, other than the acre that was occupied by the plant, free to do something else with. So these opportunities come up. And do I live in Houston? No. Is it humid there? Yes. Does it rain a lot there? Yes. But it's still good for a data center. They need data centers everywhere. So yes, look for specific buildings. Look for specific opportunities.
What about Chicago?
Chicago. Yeah, I've looked there at a data center. That deal didn't go ahead. And by the way, if you think, well, he's talking about all the deals that didn't go ahead. If you don't know, I've got a book called Real Estate Riches where I have a rule. It's called the 100-10-3-1 rule. And that is that you've got to look at 100 properties to find 10 even worthy of putting an offer in on. I say that even though you shouldn't end a sentence on a preposition. But anyway, if you put offers in on 10 buildings, that doesn't mean you can buy them. They might not all be accepted. In fact, if all your 10 offers were accepted, you're offering too much, guys. So maybe only 3 get accepted. Does that mean you can buy 3? No, we have to get funding for them. You don't have the cash for them. If you had the cash, you'd be bidding on bigger, better buildings, right? So we try to get funding and maybe only 1 works. So we've looked at 100 to get 1. So when I say I looked at a data center in Houston, that didn't go through, and I looked at one, where did you say, Chicago? And I can tell you, I looked at 1 more, it was in Denver. None of them went through. But remember, your success isn't on the things that didn't go through, it's on the few that do. It's a numbers game. So you just got to play the numbers game. But yeah, Denver's good. That's a big, big city, a big central hub of information flow. Chicago's great too. I'm a little concerned about Chicago because I think it's the only city where the population trend isn't in keeping with some of the other parts of the country. But time will tell. It's certainly, it's very European. It's like New York for beginners, if I can put it that way. The architecture there is absolutely stunning. I love Chicago. I love it in the summer more than in the winter.
That's true.
But that's because I don't particularly like the cold. That's another reason why I like Phoenix.
That's phenomenal. So there are 2 big events that you put together once per year, one in New Zealand, another one in Italy. Which one you would like to talk about first?
Oh my gosh, so to give that perspective, I mean, I do events, or I've done events over the decades in 27 countries, and I love it all. I love sharing information, and certainly if someone gets some benefit from it. So I do events at $20 a head and $2,000 a head, and the information's essentially the same. Very interestingly, Eva, when I do a $20 a head event, most people really, really get $20 worth, and when I do a $2,000 a head event, they get $2,000 worth, even though it's the same information. So just file that away somewhere. But it's true, these events all have topics, and they have agendas. So by Monday morning, we're talking on this topic, and by Tuesday after lunch, we'll cover this. You have to have an agenda when you get people through a prescribed course. But you're right, I do run 2 events. One is on the shores of Lake Como in Italy. We call it the Lake Como Experience. And there's no agenda. What I teach there depends on who shows up and what they need to know to go to the next level. So it's very individualized. It's usually for between 6 and 12 people. It's very expensive. It's one of those things, if you need to ask the price, you probably can't afford it. And the fee does cover everything. It covers all the accommodation and meals and excursions. I kind of want to control the environment so that you can focus on where you're at, what's in your head, not, oh, I wonder if I've been kicked out of my hotel because I didn't have the deposit ready and I had the wrong currency and I lost my passport and all that nonsense. The interesting thing is we've never had a request for a refund. People often come back for repeat visits, but this time they bring a spouse or partner or business associate or something like that. And the whole idea is that everyone thinks that they're doing good and they're kind and they're reasonable and they're fair and they're honest. And then why aren't I doing really well? Why can't I afford to buy a castle in France? And very often the things holding them back are not society, but their own self-limiting beliefs. They just don't know what they are because they've read a lot of the books. They've read, how to improve yourself in this area and the importance of this, all those titles that come to mind, right? But they're still not quite doing as well as they think they should. And very often they can't see the forest for the trees, if you know what I mean. They can't imagine what it is that if they just tweak this, they can soar. And I've got countless examples of people here where we just tweak one little thing, it really changes the course of their life. And so, you can share a link if you like. It's the Lake Como, LakeComoMastermind.com.
Awesome.
And then that is a very gentle event. If anyone knows Lake Como, it's stunningly beautiful there. I think Lake Como is the jewel of the Northern Hemisphere. Franz Liszt, the pianist, had his holiday home there. King Leopold of Belgium. Versace had a home there. George Clooney, as you probably all know, has his home there. Everyone loves it. It is aesthetically just so stunningly beautiful. A Month on the Lake with Vanessa Redgrave and Dame Judi Dench, that was filmed there. One of the James Bond movies was filmed. I got married there, actually.
Wow.
The shores of Lake Como. Villa Balbianello. It's just beautiful. It's stunning. So that's that kind of event where you want to have, 5-star dining and you name it. Then the other event you mentioned is one I run down in New Zealand, Queenstown, New Zealand. I personally think Queenstown is the jewel of the Southern Hemisphere. And heck, if I'm going to put on these events, why not put them on in a great place, right? But it's known as the adventure capital of the world, and we call these events the adrenaline events. And the whole premise is that we all know that all growth occurs outside of your comfort zone. You're aware of that, right?
Absolutely.
So you need to go and stretch yourself, do something out of the ordinary. And then the metaphor is, well, if I can do that, then I can change this thing in my business world or in my relationship world or whatever. So we throw people off mountains there, quite literally. Always willingly. They don't have to do any of this, by the way.
Really?
And, you know, if they want, we give them parachutes or paragliders or hang gliders, whatever they want. We go jet boating at 140 kilometers an hour. By the way, jet boating was invented down in New Zealand. And then we turn on a dime so you get 3.5, 4 G-forces that spin you around. And the looks on people's faces, no one is sad or crying. Everyone has got the biggest grin you can imagine. In fact, their cheekbones are sore from grinning so much. It's so, but there's the metaphor. So we usually have class time, you know, in the morning where we go over certain things, and then we go out and do these amazing adrenaline activities that kind of change people's attitude. I mean, there's life before you went to Queenstown and life after, kind of.
love
really, it's a lot of fun, yeah.
Seems like so exciting. What time of the year are you doing those events?
Well, they're in different hemispheres. So down in New Zealand, it's summertime when it's winter in the northern hemisphere, of course. The calmest month for weather is February. So I like to do them either January, February, or March. That's a great time of year to be there. Not so much until the middle of January, because that's the holiday season there. February, all the kids go back to school. The school year in New Zealand goes from February to November, as you can imagine. So yes, February, March, that's a great time of year. And then in Italy, you want to avoid being there in June, July, August. It's overrun by tourists. And in August, everyone in Italy takes off in their clothes, restaurants, hotels, you name it. It's the month they have off. So usually we like to do those in April or May. May's a great month for the Lake Como events, in Italy.
That's phenomenal. So if people want to do some reservations about any of these events, where they go?
Well, the best way, I think, for your people is to contact you. I think that would be a smart way. But if you want to learn more, we do have the website lakecomoexperience.com. It shows you information there. You can, find out more there. And most people, though, before they're ready to just go and sign up, they wonder, well, when is the next one? When could I be on? What do you need to do to qualify? I have a spouse. I'm not sure if my spouse wants to attend or just be there. We have programs, by the way, if spouses want to join. They do so at a discounted rate, of course. But if they just want to go and be there but not participate, we have programs for that as well. That often takes a bit more conversation.
That's amazing.
But
Also,
no, if you're really interested, you'll find a way.
yes,
That's sort of
that's
the...
for sure.
Yeah.
And you're here, right?
Yeah,
I am
exactly.
here too if you need help.
Right.
So, Dolf, I love what you do about commercial property. The way you buy commercial property without using any of your money and get the bank to finance 100%, how is that possible? Are you able to teach us that? Right here in the video?
Yes, it depends how long you want to make the video.
Huge ask.
I've been teaching this stuff for 40 years, guys. I've written many books. I think I've got 23 books out there, 15 on real estate, 1 on commercial real estate. I've got commercial real estate courses. And yet people say, how do you do that? And it's so easy to fall into the realm of normality. So the normal way you buy a commercial building is it's on the market, it's got tenants, it's got what's called a cap rate of 6%. Let's not go into detail there. Most people use the term cap rate incorrectly, which prevents them from becoming rich in commercial real estate.
Really?
But they basically mean it's got a return of 6%. So if it's $1 million building, it's got $60,000 of income. And if money is costing you 7%, which it is right now, how can you ever afford to buy that and pay property taxes and insurance and maintenance and a leaking roof and all that? So they don't do it. And that's the conventional way of doing that. If you haven't yet figured out that I'm not exactly conventional, then we need to start from the beginning. So most people want a tenant because they think, I can't afford to own a building that doesn't have a tenant. If I don't even have a tenant, I don't even have the 6%. Well, I twist around. I look for vacant or semi-vacant buildings. I don't buy them because I'm the first to admit I can't afford to own a building that's got no revenue at all. But
Yeah.
The truth is that usually, not always, usually a vacant building sells for a lot less than a tenanted building. Now, we're talking commercial real estate here, guys. I know that doesn't apply in residential. In residential property, the value of a home is based on comps or comparables. It doesn't matter whether the property is tenanted or not. In fact, it's probably easier to sell if it's not tenanted, because if the buyer wants to be an owner-occupant, they can move in straight away, whereas if there's a tenant there, you have to wait for the lease tenancy agreement to expire.
Yeah.
But when it comes to commercial property, the value of a commercial property is a multiple of its rental income. So at a 10% cap rate, it's worth 10 times the rental income. You've got 100,000 of rent, it's worth $1 million.
Yep.
So hold that thought. If cap rate's at 10% and the rental income's 100,000, it's worth $1 million. Can I afford to pay $1 million for it? No. However, if it's vacant, the value should plummet. I say should because some fools try and sell a vacant building based on what they call pro forma, as if it were tenanted. And I'll say to them, well, if it's it's not tenanted. No, they say it's easy to get a tenant. I say, okay, well then if it's easy, you do the easy bit, you get the tenant, then I'll buy it. And they say, well, it's not that easy. I said, at least we're on the same page. So that same building that sold for $1 million when it was rented for 100,000 a year, it might only sell for $500,000 if it's not rented. So I'll get a contract on that building, and then before closing on it, I'll get a tenant. And if I get a tenant at our market value of 100,000 and cap rates at 10%, then suddenly the value has gone from the 500,000 that it's worth vacant to $1 million because I got a tenant.
Exactly.
So I go to the bank, and the banks have this rule where they take the lesser of the purchase price or the registered appraisal, or in some countries, most countries, it's called the registered valuation. And so they say, my naysayer say, well, how do you get around that? So I go to the bank and I say, Mr. Bank Manager, I know you have this rule where you take the lesser of the purchase price or the registered appraisal. And I know I'm only paying $500,000 for this building, but between signing a contract at $500,000 and today, I've got a tenant for 5 years paying $100,000 a year. Surely even your most conservative, slow-thinking, tranquilized turtle on ice valuer or appraiser has got to agree it's worth more than $500,000. So, well, we're not so sure about that. But anyway, they'll agree and they'll fund it. 80% or 70% or 60% of $1 million is still more than you're paying for it. If they don't do that, then get deferred settlement, where you buy it, but you close in 3 months' time and pay them interest in the meantime. But then you can go to the bank with your hand in your heart and say, yeah, I bought it a long time ago for $500,000, but now it's been tenanted. The tenant's been paying rent all along. They've got 4.7 or whatever it is, 4.8 years to run on the lease, and it's now, and they'll get an appraisal and it'll be worth more.
Okay, so if that first they don't give you because they want to see the tenant's gonna really be there and perform, so then you can come 3 months later and you do the same approach and you get the money.
It's because they have this silly rule they have to take the lesser of. And the reason why bank managers invoke this rule, it's not to do, and this is where understanding human nature comes in handy. It's got nothing to do with their conscious thoughts or their policy. It's all in their subconscious mind, because subconsciously, this bank manager's thinking, I've been the bank manager for 40 stinking years, and I'm earning a salary of whatever it is, $115,000 a year, maybe not $87,000 a year, and if I'm lucky, I'll get a 3% rise. And here's this young chick from Brazil called Iva who comes along, and she thinks that she can just buy a $500,000 building and poof, it's worth $1 million. If it were that easy, I'd be doing it. And because I'm not doing it and I'm an honorable person, there's got to be something. I can't say yes to that. That's too easy for her. If I say yes to this, she'll do another one next week. And then she'll have made $1 million while I'm still on my $87,000 a year salary with maybe a 3% rise at the end of the year. So subconsciously he's saying it can't be that good, it can't be that easy, therefore I'm going to say no. And I know many people will watch this, many bank managers may, well, that's not me. Well, I've got a lot of experience because I've applied for many more mortgages than I've successfully acquired. And I'm sure a lot of this goes on. They don't want to realize it's that easy. Had one very interesting situation. I had applied for many mortgages through one particular bank, and the guy got to know me and he got to know how good my deals were, pardon me, and he retired. And then I didn't hear from him for about 3 years, and then I got a call. And he said, Dolf, can I make an appointment to see you? And I said, well, I don't really take appointments. He said, come on, after all those mortgages, can't I meet with you? And I said, okay. And he came along and he said, I've been watching you all these years. I think I know what you're doing will you teach me how? And that was a seminal moment for me.
Really?
Yeah, because,
Wow.
you know, and that's part of what motivates me to get this message out there. Will it work with every building you come across? Can you wake up tomorrow morning? Well, you can't be asleep now, but you know what I mean. Can you wake up the next day and go out and look at a building and say, oh, it's empty, I'll buy it and make $500,000? Probably not. You got to look at 100 to find one. And by the way, if you don't find one after 100, look at another 100. That's an average thing, right? But if you persevere, you will find them. And what I do is not rare. Many people are doing it. And they just don't advertise it the way I do because they're more focused on finding the next building, whereas I want to share the message as I go along.
So though in the commercial world, it's a lot easier to get the seller to finance for a period of time. So that would be a very good opportunity and option for somebody to come along, buy the building, a seller finance, maybe not for 500, maybe 600, right? So then you promise to pay in about a year or so, pay back like a balloon. And do you think that would be a lot easier for the bank to give them the money since you already own the building for a little bit?
Yes, it's a yes, but it's a qualified yes. Because let's talk about phases of the economic cycle. If things are turning bad, and right now there are a few indicators that we might be going into a rough patch. If things are going bad, then usually when people sell, it's because they need the money. So when they sell a building, it's vacant, it should be worth $1 million tenanted, but it's only worth $500,000. They're going to be reluctant to not get their cash. They're selling it because they need the cash. So it's going to be tougher to get them to say yes. On the other hand, when the economy is strong and prices are high, generally when people sell then, it's usually because they're retiring, they don't want to be bothered with it anymore, they're changing their emphasis from small size commercial buildings to larger size or something like that. So in those cases, it's generally easier to get a seller carryback or vendor finance. But one thing I teach, and I put in all my books, is whenever you buy a building, you should always, and I then emphasize the word, always ask the seller, are you willing to leave some money in? At worst, they're going to say no. Well, that's not the worst. I guess technically they could hit you over the head with an umbrella or say, are you a stark, raving, stupid idiot for even asking? Of course I'm not going to. I mean, that's the worst. But mostly they'll say, no, not really. We've got plans for the money, but thanks for asking or something. But every time, like 1 in 10, 1 in 15, they'll say yes. In fact, I had a very bizarre situation where I was buying a property. There was $800,000 and I was short of money. And I said to this elderly couple, would you consider leaving in $300,000? And they said, well, we'll have to discuss that tonight. And can we get back to you tomorrow? You know, and I thought, well, this is never going to happen. So anyway, I waited the whole day. It seemed like a week. But they came back and they said, well, we've been thinking about it, and other such statements that had no relevance. Of course they have. And they said, and we were wondering, could we leave in 600,000? And I'd never thought of asking for more, but they were retiring. They didn't want to be bothered with the management, but they still liked the building. They'd owned it for a while. This way, by having money in it, they knew that if they didn't pay, they'd get the building back, but they'd get interest more than the bank was paying them, because what banks are paying us these days is next to none. In fact, in some countries now, it's a negative interest rate. In Denmark, you have to pay the bank to keep your money in the bank, right? Yeah. So, you know, always ask, will you be willing to leave some money in? And you'll be surprised how often they say, yeah, actually, it's not a bad idea. And that alleviates the pain, absolutely.
Great, awesome. Can you describe to us the best deal, one of the best, because I know you did many, and I heard about many of them on your audios. So can you remember and describe one of the deals that you've done?
Oh gosh, so in New Zealand, we're a nation of sheep. At one stage, we had 72 million sheep and only 3 million people. Or you could have said that there were 75 million sheep, of which 3 million thought they were human. But anyway, we had a lot of sheep. And we were selling sheep meat and wool all over the world. But in the 1980s, at some stage, the bottom dropped out of the sheep meat and sheep wool market. And about a third of farmers went bankrupt. And there was kind of blood on the streets. They would herd their sheep through the streets of the capital, past parliament buildings, to protest the fact that the government had dropped the $10 subsidy per head on sheep. So farmers used to get $10 per head of sheep, and often that was their income stream. So they would stock their farms with lots of sheep just to get the $10, not because they could do anything with them. So the government said this is ridiculous. They abolished it from one day to the next. They didn't slowly and gradually phase it out, and a third of sheep farmers went bankrupt. So no one knew what to do with these sheep farms. So I was involved with a group at the time. We would buy them up for literally pennies on the dollar.
Really?
Yeah. And then we planted a crop. And we had to wait 5 years to get our first harvest. And the harvest was grapes. We turned them into vineyards. And everyone wanted to be able to say, oh, I own my own vineyard, you know. In fact, would you like a bottle of my latest whatever wine or something? And the irony is, I don't even like wine. I don't drink it really. I don't like most alcohols. I can't think of any. I do like vodka. Is like cleaning fluid to me. So I got into the vineyard game not because of any predilection for consuming the product of what it created, but rather it was a financial deal. It was a real estate deal. It's changing the use of the building. I've changed the thrift store generating $12 a foot into a coffee shop generating $24 a foot. So the rent doubled, and by doubling the rent, the value of the building doubled, because remember, the value of a building when it comes to commercial is a multiple of the rental income. Or if you want to know the specifics, it is the rental income divided by the cap rate. That's how the cap rate came about. Cap rate is short for capitalization rate. It's the rate at which you capitalize the income to arrive at the value. People use it to talk about return, but that's a different concept. And anyway, we've touched on it. We won't go into more detail right now.
You have been traveling 27 different countries.
Well, over the years I've taught in 20, I've been to many more, and some of them, I used to do annual events in Thailand, for instance. I've got a bit of a following there, and I just love going there. I love the food, I love the people, and I'd put on these events there every year, yeah.
And how many of them have you been investing?
How many of those countries?
Or have ever invested in any of these countries?
Oh, it's so hard to say because you can't invest personally in many of these cases. In Thailand, you can only legally have a 49% shareholding in a company that owns real estate unless it's second-hand residential or something like that. All the rules vary country by country. But I've been involved in groups and been an advisor to company and been on the board of companies and all that. So it's a mixture of what I've been involved in. Public companies, private companies. So many of them I've participated in some way, shape or form. I love it. It's fascinating. The different rules and the regulations. And people see rules and regulations as something that's really stifling their ability to get jobs done. But you know how I see rules and regulations? I don't like them, but I see them as something that keeps people with less determination, my competition, at bay, because they give up far more easily than I do. Just now we have to apply for this. Oh, forget that. We're out of here. And you just keep you fill out a form, and then you wait 2 months.
Yeah.
And
What's the problem?
Yeah. So it's just it's a test of your ability to persevere.
Exactly. I love that. So when was the last time you bought a single family home?
Not for a while. Once you understand how good commercial real estate is, you don't really want to spend time looking at residential, unless it's home you're going to live in. But even then, like once I had a home, I had a commercial building, which we converted into apartments. Sometimes that's worth doing. And I had the top floor, and it had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city all around. So I lived in a commercial building. But no, if you're looking at residential property, you can do so to live in, then it's still worthwhile. Other than that, I'd rather devote my time to commercial real estate. So I can't think of the last time I bought a home. Maybe it's the home I live in Phoenix, who knows?
What about triple net? What do you have to say about triple net?
Well, there's a whole slew of advantages of commercial real estate over residential. And I'll highlight one now for those who haven't experienced the difference. And that is when you have a residential investment property, you collect rent as you'd normally expect. But from that rent, you, the landlord, you have to pay for property taxes, insurance, maintenance, anything else that comes up like that. So the rent you collect is a gross rent, and you have to then make those payments. It's typical in the commercial world all over the world. It's not exclusively so, but it's usually the case that commercial leases, certainly the bigger ones, are what's called triple net. That means they're net of the property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, which means the tenant pays those three items in addition to paying the rent. So the base rent might be, 300 euros a square meter or $25 a square foot, for instance. That's the rent. But in addition to that, they pay their pro rata portion of the property tax, insurance, and the maintenance. There are a number of advantages of doing it this way. Obviously, there's a cash flow advantage. You're no longer responsible for those out of your rent. Although usually if it's not triple net, then the rental per square foot would be higher to compensate. But the advantage of triple net is, let's say I have a 5-year lease and there are rent reviews every 2 years. That means the tenant knows that for the next 2 years, their rent is going to stay the same. However, if the city increases the property taxes, or if the insurance company increases their premiums the way they have a lot lately, then I can show them to the tenant and pass them on. It's passed through for me. They pay the higher premiums, I don't. And you might say, well, that's unfair. You're a rapacious, racketeering landlord benefiting at the expense of these poor, unsuspecting, kind, innocent commercial tenants. No, they run a commercial operation there, and it's standard policy in the commercial world to do that. There's also what's known as a ratchet clause, where rents can stay the same at rent review or go up, but they can't go down. And many people say that's unfair, but no, the answer is that commercial landlords can afford to offer a lower base rate than they otherwise would have to if there was no such ratchet clause. So the bottom line for tenants is it's far more stable. The commercial market is far more stable. Also with longer leases, even if the economy goes down for 2 years, if there's a 5-year lease, let alone 10 or 15, then by the time the lease is up for review, the economy's recovered again. So there's more stability in the commercial market, both for tenants and for landlords.
That's phenomenal. Is that possible? You buy triple net creatively? Have you done one?
I don't quite know what you mean by, is it possible
Meaning
to buy triple net?
creative finance, like without using your money, because triple net is a desirable property.
Yes.
So a lot of people come and buy for cash, and they have to compete with those people that have the money. So
I see what you're saying. Yes.
Can we buy without money?
I can't compete with people with cash. If there's an offer tower that's 40 million and there's some family office that's looking to deploy 200 million in the next 3 months and they have an interest in that, holy smoke, they can bid it up to 50 million. It wouldn't bother them. I just can't do that. So I don't look for existing leases that are triple net. Again, I look for vacant or semi-vacant buildings, and then I find a tenant and I put them on a triple net lease. So in that sense, so all of my deals are creatively financed. I've never had the cash to buy a building, ever, because if even name a number. If you've got $1 million in cash, technically you could go out and buy $1 million property. I wouldn't want to do that. I want leverage. One of the biggest advantages of real estate over every other investment vehicle is that you can get leverage, right? Banks are falling over themselves to give you money to buy real estate. Not so much on business loans. In fact, if a real estate loan is 7%, business loans are 14, 15%. Credit card loans, 24 to 30%. Risk versus reward, right? So the risk to the bank of a real estate loan is a lot lower than the risk of a credit card default or a business default. So yeah, for those reasons, if I've got $1 million, I don't want to buy $1 million building. I want to buy a $10 million building, or 20 if I can, minimum of 5.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Do you know, in Chicago there are a lot of buildings that are empty.
Yes.
So what do you recommend me to do to get there and start to analyze those deals, if there's anything that can be done? Because they are boarded up, they are empty for a while. What should I do?
Well, it's a good question. I'm not focusing on office space at the moment, for a whole bunch of reasons. You could say that COVID killed the desire for people to work in offices, and even the need to be socially distant. Man, that phrase seems almost foreign now. That we would just go back to our offices, but many loved being at home. Many companies are forcing their employees to go back to the office because from their perspective, employees are more productive when they're in an office environment rather than in their pajamas at home doing Zoom and feeding the canary and the dog and the cat and the kids and everything else. So many people are converting commercial buildings to residential towers. That's been done. But some buildings are easy to convert and others are harder. And obviously the easiest ones have been done first, so it gets harder and harder. Some are being converted to pickleball court facilities and other things. But here's the thing. The population of the US is still increasing. It has been. And when I was a kid, I remember learning it was 225 million. It's now 338 or something like that.
Wow.
You know, I mentioned New Zealand, 3 million population. When I was a kid, it was 2.2. Now it's over 5 million. I lived in Australia as a kid, 12.5 million, now 26 million. So populations are increasing. There are certain sectors of our working environment that still need offices. Attorneys tend not to work from home. Imagine having a litigation case and you go and meet your attorney in his kitchen office. But no, they have offices.
They have to.
Accountants tend to have offices. So if the population is increasing and a certain percentage of them need offices, and they're not building any office towers at the moment, then at some stage that vacant space will be consumed and then prices will go up. And they're not going to build anything new until the value of the new space is more than what you can buy existing stock for. And right now it's cheap, as we know.
Wow.
So yeah, there is that anomaly. But on the other hand, this morning I read a report, got to read more, folks, that they say there's one prediction that over 90% of jobs will be gone by 2035.
Oh my gosh.
Because AI can take over just about anything. And you think about it, here in Phoenix, for 5 years now, we've had Waymo, which is driverless taxis. And even in the 5 years that I've seen it, and the number of Waymo cars I see in any day driving around, it's gone up exponentially. Have you been in a Waymo?
I'm going to go to the airport tomorrow and
Do it in a Waymo. It is such a unique experience.
What about the price? Is it more expensive or
It's
same
cheaper
thing?
because you don't have to pay for the salary and their health care
Incredible.
and their dental care and their insurance and all that.
Oh my.
And I've got people, Eva, they say, Dolf, I wouldn't trust my life to a computer. Well, let me tell you, something like 93% of accidents are not caused by mechanical failure, but rather by human error. A driver falling asleep at the wheel, or which unfortunately is a lot more common, someone drinking too much. The number of wrong way drivers we have here on our freeway system, where for some reason they get on the freeway the wrong way, I would say 95% of those are drunk cases. We can eliminate all of that. I'm all for it. I feel safer in a Waymo than a cab with a driver. I hate to say it. Is it going to kill all the cab driver jobs? Yes. I think by 2030, cars and trucks will, for the most part, be driven driverlessly. I guess that's an oxymoron, but you know what I mean. There won't be drivers in them. It's just the way forward. Now, remember, when cars were introduced, people wrote letters to the editor complaining that all the boys who used to scoop up the horse manure will be put out of work. And guess what? They were put out of work, but they're now employed making driverless cars and all that sort of thing. So I don't know if this AI situation can be resolved. It could be that if it's true that 95% of jobs will be taken over by some form of AI combined with robotics. I don't think everyone can work on robotics and AI. But we've got to think ahead and we've got to be creative. People always have to live somewhere. So residential will always have a place, but we also get our cars washed, even if we send our driverless car off to get it clean, because you're only seen in a dirty car. So we need car washes. We need to buy food, even if it's delivered differently. It's all businesses that will still exist.
No, you talk about car wash. What do you think about this industry?
Well, it's one way of coming clean. No, I think it's listen, I've got a car. You've seen it. It is a color that shows dust the least. And here in Arizona, we don't get much rain. It rains, half a dozen times a year. And when it does rain, though, it pours. So my car gets washed when it rains, and I do the opposite of what most people, they get everything inside. I put my car outside. It's a free car wash, right? I'm being a little bit facetious, but some people are obsessed with washing cars. I've got a friend who takes his car through every week. Well, after 6 years of ownership, $15 a week, you'd have to work it out. That's $750 a year, isn't it? Times 6. That's a lot. You can buy a second-hand car for that. So anyway, but it's a good bit. I know many people who have owned car washes. I've had a crack at a few. They are lucrative businesses, yeah.
Yeah, they sell
I think they're
subscriptions, right?
They sell subscriptions. Yeah, for X dollars a week, you can go through as many times as you like.
Exactly.
Yeah, and people want it. And so, yeah, it's good. Do it.
Love it, love it. Okay, so if you had today $1 million, what would you look for to buy?
Oh, I'd look for commercial property Preferably a good location. There's old maxim, location. Can't get around it. I'd look for a bargain. Most people, they look for average. And yet you want to always beat the average. And that's the other thing I'll say about real estate that I love. In no other industry do I know how you can beat the average. Like stock market investing, everyone tries to beat the average. Every fund manager tries to beat the average. And you'll often see them advertise, hey, our fund beat the average for the last 4 years straight. And when I read that, I think more power to them. But that tells me that 5 years ago, they didn't beat the average. And 6 years ago, they didn't beat the average, right? Whereas with real estate, I've got 18 ways of beating the average. You can beat the average by buying something below market value. When it comes to getting tenants, most people put a little sign on a sheet of paper. If your metric, it's A4, but it's a standard letter sheet of paper, and there's a digit missing on the phone number. Get a massive big sign printed on canvas, 10 yards wide and 2 yards high, for lease with a phone number, and make sure that it's a real phone number and that someone answers it. And put a website on it too and have all the details there, including the price. This nonsense about, well, I'll force them to call me because when they hear the price from me, even though they'll be shocked, I'll talk them into it. No, you won't. Let it be known. We've got so many different ways of getting a tenant that when people hear them, they say, well, that's pretty logical, isn't it? Yeah, but they didn't invoke them.
Yeah.
Different ways of getting finance. Always ask, will you be willing to leave in some seller finance in this? And go to different banks. Gosh, we've got techniques for applying for a mortgage. Anyway, it's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, you can beat the average in so many ways. So beat the average. Look for something that's different. Look for a change of use.
Yeah. What about RV parks? Seems like they're very popular today.
They are right now. I mean, accommodation stuff. I think it's fair to say that it's harder for young people, say in the early 20s, to get a foothold in the real estate market today than it would have been for my generation or your generation. Okay, I said it, but anyway. I think it's tougher now than it was a while ago. So yes, I think RV parks are very popular, and the great thing about them, there are two ways of doing it. Either they just lease the land and they have their own RV on top, and then you just collect that money, or progressively you can buy them or buy your own elsewhere and install them there and lease them out as that. The returns on them are very high relative to the capital outlay. So yes, they're very, very lucrative.
Very lucrative,
yeah.
Okay. What about co-living?
What about what?
Co-living.
Oh, co-living.
It's very popular today as well.
Yes, surprisingly, it's been slow to take off in the States. In other jurisdictions, in other countries, it's a whole industry. In the UK, for instance, it's known as HMO, houses of multiple occupancy, where you might get a house split up into 8 rooms, and the revenue they get from 8 rooms leased separately is way high. It could be double or treble what you would have got by renting that whole house out as one, rentable unit.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's very popular in other places. I think part of the nomenclature here is wrong, because here, like when my daughter was at university, she shared a 2-bedroom apartment. But the person she shared the apartment with, and it was a woman, by the way, but it was called a roommate. Well, where I come from, where we also speak English, but a different flavor of English, a roommate is someone you share a room with. We call an apartment a flat. So you have flatmates, so people who live in the same flat, they're apartment mates or flatmates. So I think the notion of roommate stops people from renting a room by room in some weird way. Anyway, that's an odd theory that I haven't put to the test. But I think it will become increasingly popular here as people realize the merits of it. Or those in dire need. They just can't afford to get a house on their own or a patio home or an apartment, so they'll take a room, especially if they're young and they're in a city, they've got a job for a year, but they don't really want to live in that city long term, so they know it's short term.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, Dolf, there's anything that you want to tell the audience? Anything?
Oh, yes, of course. When you get up tomorrow morning, make sure you have a healthy breakfast, guys. Stop eating all this junk food. We're already at a big disadvantage here in America, unfortunately, where we allow a lot of junk food to be in our food. The average sugar consumption per capita in the US is double that of the OECD average. And we also have double the rate of diabetes. We have sugar and everything. They've made us addicted to sugar. And cut it out. The substitutes are bad too, xylitol, aspartame, all those high fructose corn syrup. Just cut it out of your diet. Is that what you meant? Like
And don't
advice
forget
like
about
that?
the alcohol, huh? No alcohol.
Yeah, there used to be, the studies all used to indicate that a small amount of alcohol was good. It was good for your heart. One glass of wine was good. They talked about France, how they drink a lot of wine and they seem to be pretty healthy. But in the last 2 years, a lot of studies have come out, long-term studies where they coalesce studies from all different countries. And they say, no, actually, any alcohol is bad for you. No. I can understand why people drink alcohol, not from the taste, because I've just never, I keep trying, but I keep thinking, no, I'd rather have a mango juice or coconut water or just pure water, right? But also, you know, the thing that I don't understand is smoking. And here in America, we've really knocked smoking on the head really well. I remember the time when they said that we're going to ban smoking in bars. So when they brought this rule in that you could no longer smoke in bars, 95% of all the bar owners complained that 95% of our patrons smoke. So you're going to kill 95% of our business. Well, that's not what happened. What they didn't realize is that many people in bars, they smoke because it's socially acceptable, it's pressure to smoke, and they don't want to appear. So they actually preferred that there was no smoking, and their patronage went up. And so we introduced it into restaurants. And first it was only inside, but then also outside. And then within 20 or 30 feet of a federal building or whatever, we've really knocked it on the head. And much as I love Europe, I grew up there. I speak 4 of their languages. I go there. I've been 4 times this year. I love it there. But one thing that always annoys me when I'm there is the number of people that smoke. Young people, old people, shopkeepers are not allowed to smoke in their shops, so they shop and they smoke in the doorway where you're maybe trying to get in, you have to get through the smoke. Or I was having a breakfast in this beautiful little place called Carolina's in Malta, and I'm sitting outside, beautiful weather, sunshine, view of the harbor, and 2 couples come, one sits to the left, one to the right, and all 4 of them light up. And I said to the waitress, I said, are you allowed to smoke here? She said, oh, yes, outside. If you want to not smoke, you have to go inside. I said, oh, so the non-smokers, we're condemned to going inside, no view, no fresh air. But those who want to pollute and, you know, make it horrible for those trying to eat breakfast, they're allowed to smoke. She said, yeah, well, that's the way it is. So anyway, I encourage you to listen to your body, and if you can, cut out the smoking, not for my sake, chances of you and I sitting together in a breakfast restaurant in Malta next to nil, but for your own sake. It's so demonstrably not good, right? That's and true. Same with food. We are what we eat. So yeah, eat food and read more. And then try and look at the good side of things. Have gratitude for things. Be happy. And hang with people that inspire you and that are doing great things that you can learn from. And then you'll see slowly your life will change. You'll feel better. You'll walk a bit further, you'll walk a bit taller, you'll look for more creative solutions for things, you'll hang with a better set of people. You know, there's that saying, if you're the smartest person in the room's in trouble. You need a new set of friends. You know, you need to be able to learn. That's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
Talk about learning. What the book would you recommend for somebody that wants to learn more about being creative and investing?
Just always be reading, you know. It's not as if there's one book. Sure, I could name a book, you know, the Habits of Highly Successful People, or the 4-Minute Manager, and The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz, and Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, and Napoleon Hill, of course, read him, and read anything you can, listen to anything you can of Jim Rohn. I had the pleasure of touring Asia with Jim Rohn. But keep reading, learn. You'll never learn less, guys. You'll never learn less. Even if you read a book, you invest $30 and 3 hours of your life, or 6 if you're a slow reader, consuming just one book, and you just get one idea from that book. That one idea can set you on a different course for the rest of your life. It's a good trade-off.
Absolutely.
You know, so just read more, learn more, be willing to be open to ideas, and watch less TV if you're a TV addict, because you know, what did you really learn from, unless you're watching really useful, interesting documentaries or programs, get out there and create your own life. Do something to have someone make a program about you instead of just watching other people's lives.
What about audiobooks?
Oh, they're good. So some people don't learn well by reading. You know, there's a test you can do, it's called the VAK test, that tells you to which extent you're visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. There's one flaw in it, I think, and that is like, I'm 80% visual and 16% auditory and 4% kinesthetic. But it's not on an absolute scale. So there's nothing to say that my 4% of kinesthetic predilection is not more perceptive or more attuned than, say, someone else is 20% kinesthetic. So, but apart from that, so I learn well visually. I learn well by reading. But many people don't, and many people like audiobooks, and if that's the way you learn, do that. There are many advantages. It's easier to listen to an audiobook when you're the driver in a car than reading a book visually when you're the driver in a car. But as we discussed before long we won't have drivers in cars anyway, so everyone can read books or listen to audio, whatever their natural preference is. So yes, audiobooks are great, just learn. And podcasts are great, and the fact that you're listening to this, hopefully you're getting something from it, even if it's deciding what you don't like about me, that's okay, but learn something, have an opinion. They say the opposite of love is hate. It's not. The opposite of love is indifference, where you couldn't care less, you couldn't give two hoots about something. Who cares? Be passionate about things, not just red hot passionate, white hot passionate. Decide if you'll be willing to make a stand. He who doesn't stand for something falls for anything. And if you've got this pattern where people come along, I've got this great money-making idea for you, you should do this, and you follow that, and then you do this, and then you do that, and you're always switching and never making money. It's time to put a line in the sand and say, enough. I'm going to decide for myself what I think is within my wheelhouse, what I'm capable of. Is your power the power of influence? If it's not, do something else. But figure out what it is and learn new skills. You're not set in stone. You're mobile. You can learn new skills. In fact, you better, because whatever job you have today, in 10 years' time, it won't exist.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you so much, Dolf.
My pleasure.
Such a pleasure to have you here. And of course, let's keep talking and doing business together.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so
everyone.
much. Thank you.